No, great.
See, I'm
I'd
not
like to
that
call
late.
Wednesday, February 18th, 2026 meeting of the Tucson-Pima County Joint Consolidated Code Committee to order. Can we have the roll call, please?
Rick Bright,
Here.
Dennis Kuhn,
Here.
Fred Knapp,
Here.
Jeff Hamstra,
Here.
Ken Cawthorn,
I'm here.
Thomas Hayes,
Here.
Dave Gibbons.
Here.
Chair, we have a quorum.
We have a four. Okay. So we'll go to the item on the agenda, the approval of the minutes. All right, the clerk was unhappy with something, so we have to reapprove these minutes again.
That's correct.
Right, so let's just start with the November 19th minutes. Need to reapprove those.
So this is Clayton with the city. Just as a point of clarification, at our last meeting, we had to ratify the meeting minutes from the previous meetings because there was an error in the reporting with the city clerk's office. We found out that there was a subsequent error on the meeting where we ratified those minutes, and we're re-ratifying what we ratified to correct those errors. Apologies for the duplication, but this is the city's attempt to make sure everything's good across.
Well, we want to be legal. Nothing else. Someone care to make a motion?
I'll second.
Um,
Jeff Hamstra. Second.
This is Ken Cawthorn. If we could just correct my name, it ends with an E. So, yeah, that was it.
Okay. So, all in favor of approving as amended?
Aye.
Any opposed? That motion passes. On to the October 15th, minutes. Motion,
I move to approve the October 15th minute.
motion, do we have a second?
This is Dennis, I'll second.
Motion in a second. Get the name spelled correctly on that one, Ken?
No. Noted again.
Same amendment.
Keep going.
Yeah,
Okay. All in favor of approving as amended, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. So we're legal now, Clayton?
Yes, except for the next item.
Item number 3. Let's get into that. Okay. So we have to approve the September 7th meeting. Here to make a motion. We've already approved these.
This is Dennis. I move to accept the election report from Wednesday, September 17th.
Do we have a second?
Second, Jeff Hamstra.
Any amendments, Ken?
the legal, my name.
Okay. So do we have a motion to approve the minutes as amended? Say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. And now we have the approval of the energy amendments that were presented.
So this is Ken Cawthorn. I move to approve the IACC amendments as presented.
Okay, do we have a second?
Yes, it's Dennis, I second.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Okay, now on item 4, consideration of the chair and vice chair positions. We do this what, every year?
Once per year. Once you have an emergency where a chair needs to step down.
Fortunately, no emergency. Okay. So Dave's the vice chair, or I'm the chair, so. Any thoughts?
Yeah, I like it. I'll make a motion that the chair and vice chair remain the same.
I'll second. Yeah, this Ken, I'll second it.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, motion carries. Okay, now that tedious work is done, we're on to the building codes and related items. So we'll turn this over to Clayton.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This is Clayton with the City of Tucson. At our previous meetings, we had discussed the need to meet on a quarterly basis through 2026 to discuss the ongoing implementation of the energy code and the other 2024 I codes. So you will see this agenda item on future meetings, just to make sure that the committee has the ability to continue the discussion and consider any modifications that might be necessary as we move through implementation. There was some concern prior to the adoption of the energy code about the amendments, how the amendments were crafted, whether the amendments are functioning. At this time, the city is not seeing a tremendous amount of applications coming in that are using the 2024 energy code yet, but then again, it is also optional until July 1st when it becomes mandatory. So this is the committee's opportunity to discuss those items. And also I'd like to suggest that perhaps we need to meet more frequently over the next coming months as opposed to the current scheduled plan for a quarterly meeting. But that is relative to the next agenda item, which we can talk when we get to that.
Do we know where the ComCheck is?
So this is Clayton again. The ComCheck is available to the public, but it is not it's the generic ComCheck that was created for the 2024 IACC. We still have NPPL developing regional specific ComCheck for Pima County and City of Tucson. They have not completed that yet. The latest from NPPL was that we would potentially have a beta version as early as late March to begin testing. That is catered specifically to the amendments that you've already approved.
Okay.
So, and this is Ken, as far as I know, have they even made any for any other jurisdiction? We're getting a good echo. I'm afraid to tell.
There you go.
There we go.
Oh, okay, so I could talk now. Yes, thank you. Okay, so, because it's my understanding they still haven't made it for just about any of most of the jurisdictions yet they haven't, usually get the pull down menu and it's pretty long and you search for your area, your jurisdiction, but I don't think they've done that for any of them yet that I'm aware of. Because I know, so Phoenix said that I talked to, forget who over there I was talking to, and they were saying that they still have not accepted the ComCheck because it is just a generic version and it will say that it doesn't pass. So they haven't been requiring it. So they've been accepting people just to put things in like a spreadsheet form to try to get through. They've also been, for the most part, what I understand is a lot of the people are submitting energy models to get through. And they're using the ASHRAE version because of all the ICE, what the IECC had for the energy model. So that's what I've been hearing as far as Phoenix. I talked to both one of the plan reviewers, the mechanical plan reviewer there, and I talked to Quest Energy, who does a lot of energy models up there. And they've been seeing a huge uptick and it's usually emergency, quick, I can't get this to pass. I've also had people say they were able to finally get through all of the 406.1, I think it is, which is the additional energy efficiencies, and they were able to get through that. But then when it came to the load management, they just couldn't get through it. And so then they finally just decided to do an energy model to get around all that. So that's kind of what I've been seeing on the energy code side. So I am interested to know once that gets the beta version, or once that comes out, at how it works and to try it out. Because right now that's the only option I was seeing is the energy model to get things to go through. The other,
That's pretty bad for all these small projects.
yeah, so up in Phoenix, if you're 2,000 square feet, you gotta go to the 406-1. If you're 5,000 square feet, you gotta go to that 406, which is the load management issue, which is really a challenging one. But if that has been modified, because Phoenix has also removed the requirement for the solar. So if that's been removed, then you can do that load management by just putting some solar on. And you could probably get through it that way, but I haven't been able to see if that's available, if you could go through the comp check and show that yet. What else was there? The other thing Phoenix did, which I didn't realize, they did implement the commissioning section, which at first they were going to strike it, and then they decided to put it in for reference, and that's when we decided, and that because we were meeting at that time and they had it in for reference, but now they have fully adopted the commissioning section, just to let you know. Ours is still been deleted. And I did go through the commissioning section. It's not as bad as at first I thought it was more for the load management and stuff, and it does have things in there for it, but if you have the load management, there's no commissioning for it. But my concern was, and I guess I was gonna check with, both you and you guys, you and Fred about it, this is if we do have it, it's the same as doing the balancing reports, the good contractors are gonna have it all.
Right.
It'll be working anyways. It's the bad contractors, but now every single job is gonna have a commissioning report in addition to the balance report. And I guess that's why we struck that out and just wanted to, and because that's just added cost you'd have to have for every single project.
Yes, yep.
So,
Yep.
well, it wasn't every single project. I'm sorry. Let me get back just a sec. Hold on. It was for, if it was over a certain square footage. Well, we struck it completely,
Right.
but it's required. It's not required for buildings less than 10,000 square feet. So that's the way it currently reads in the IACC. So it wouldn't be on small buildings.
Right.
It'd only be on 10,000 square feet or more. So I guess that's the question I guess I'm rethinking this, because I mean, that was the whole reason we're going through these additional meetings is, should we enforce that or just leave it as deleted as we currently have it? And so that's what I wanted to kind of talk about.
I think it might be wise to leave it deleted until we can get, a much better handle on the comm checks and all the revisions and changes and so forth
Okay,
that, sometimes the commissioning is not that big a deal on the HVAC side, it's the
right,
validating, performance
right.
and beyond CFM. It's,
90% of it is
there's so much,
thermostats are programmed.
there's so much manufactured data that we can basically, there's forms you can go in and you can apply the superheat and airflow, static pressure and all that. And it takes all that data and runs it and processes it so that you get kind of a report that, it's operating as designed to that efficiency level. TEP actually kind of does that with the residential replacement right now. There's a third party that we go on, and there's about 10 or 12 that when we commission the machine, we'll call in about the 12 of them and put it into the database. The database then spits it out and we get a report that it passes.
But see, that would be different than if we required this, because now you'd have to follow this
Right.
procedure for
Exactly.
the commission.
Which, that side of it, I like because it just validates that, you've put the unit in and it is indeed performing as,
Right.
as designed.
Right.
You know, so to me, it's kind of a nice third party.
Yeah.
I've had General Air Control do that a few times for me on commercial projects.
Yep. Yeah. Which, yeah. So I guess that's what I'm just bringing up is do we want to because I didn't realize that it also had that $10,000 or $10,000, 10,000 square foot exemption in there. That you wouldn't need to commission it if it was less than 10,000 square feet. So anyways, it's something to consider whether we want to implement it or leave it in there, scratch and or keep it deleted.
Yeah, I'm kind of with Jeff. We've shown a lot of complexity at the industry out here.
Okay.
Let's wait and see how it shakes out. And
Okay.
then we can revisit.
That's why I'm just bringing it up.
Not
Yeah.
that commissioning is a bad idea, but we just don't.
Right.
Right.
No.
And it starts with requiring a registered design professional.
Yeah.
Or an approved agency.
Correct. So they do have, you can get a certified commissioning agent which I would think would be an approved agency. So. And they say registered professional because we could commission our own projects, right? So you can go and commission your own work and we could commission other people's work too, so. Anyways. All right, that's what I want. Those are the things I
So
want.
it does go beyond mechanical.
It does.
For electrical.
Yep.
Various automatic controls, time-based controls.
Yep.
Light level responsive controls, all those things are also part of the commissioning.
Right.
So it adds another layer of complexity and cost of the project, cost for somebody to do that.
Yep.
And, I mean, what I notice on electrical is it seems like jobs always get jammed up at the end. And stuff like that, bad contractors, they don't do it.
Right.
Good contractors take care of stuff. So what it's trying to do is turn everybody into a good contractor. And
Yeah.
Good luck.
Yeah. Good luck.
I'm
Yeah.
gonna say you can't push a rope uphill.
Yeah, that's the problem.
Yeah. So this is Ken. What I see when we go through these is, I mean, let's face it, 80 to 90% of the buildings have just programmable thermostats, time clocks, real simple stuff. But guess what? None of them have been set up. They're all just plugged in and walked away so that they don't have any schedules on them and things like that. So that's the biggest thing that I see is that they walk away with no schedules and it's whether the tenant wants
We all put it in
to.
our specs that they're supposed to coordinate with the owner.
Right.
Without schedules, program things.
So it's whether the tenant,
It doesn't.
without the commissioning, it's whether the tenant then wants to go through and do all that or ask them to come back and do all that, because the tenant becomes the commissioning agent is what it really ends up being.
But sometimes the owner's facilities personnel override all that.
Correct.
Oh, sure.
That's very true.
Yeah.
Especially if you're over 10,000 square feet.
Yeah.
Now you might have the personnel to do that as compared to a little, 2,000 square foot jack in the
I
box.
interface with the small time, the owners of buildings, small buildings, and I tell them we have to do all these control things, and they say, I don't want it. I
Right.
never have anybody come and say, I want to have all this stuff.
Correct.
Because they don't have time to deal with it, they don't know how to deal with it, and it costs them money to hire somebody to do it for them, and so, it's keeping it simple is usually works better,
Right.
but the code doesn't want to go there, it wants to force all this stuff.
Yeah.
And yet at the same time, we hear all this pushback of how expensive it is to construct buildings, and that even creates problems, especially on the housing side. And so I feel like we're on this balancing act. The overall, what's the best path to
Well,
through it? I don't know the answer.
and this is Ken, and so what it is, let's face it, 90% of the time, the balancing is done after the building's occupied, and, but now they have to get the C of O, And before they can, they almost have to get a temporary C of O to then go through the balancing to submit that is probably what they're doing for a lot of these projects. And now they'd have to, after they balance it, then they'd have to go through and do the commissioning, which would take even more time. So anyways. All right,
Okay, well,
yeah,
we got a year to see how this whole thing shakes out.
yep,
An interesting year.
Okay.
They're projecting the end of March for the Comtech.
That,
data version.
that was the last I heard. I have not had an update in several weeks.
Okay, so I guess the question is, how do we get the beta version out to the folks that are gonna use it?
As soon as it's available to the city of Tucson, we'll distribute to the members of the committee.
Okay. I guess how do we get the other mechanical and electrical engineers?
yeah,
We only got two. I'm sure there's more than these two guys.
yeah.
So I mean, how do we get it to them? Like, the more people that go through a beta, the better.
My recommendation would be to have anyone that's interested in participating to contact our office, me specifically, but they contact any folks within our office and get connected with me. I will need to review what agreements we have with PNNL as far as who can participate
Okay,
in that. I just want to make sure that we're honoring PNNL's intellectual.
Well, and just to, this Ken, just for a side note, when they had the beta version come out of the contract, I forwarded it to a bunch of people and they all were able to access it, even though they just sent it to me.
Okay.
So, so I don't think they
I just want to
put a lock on it. Yeah, it'd be good to double check because I think they probably want people to try it. The more they could try it, the more they could find bugs, and which is what they're looking for.
They may also have a request for reporting issues that they would like to be followed. So that's, I just want to make sure that they're included in that conversation.
okay. All right, so you think they're gonna hit that deadline?
It's difficult to say. I know that they're working on a lot of projects. Also, they've got a number of complications associated with changes at the federal level. So it's difficult to say, but I can reach out and try and get an update.
So the other question I had is, okay, so I know Phoenix did adopt the 2024, but so many other jurisdictions up there have not adopted the 2024 yet. I mean, do we have a list of how many people have adopted the 24 energy code yet, or no?
Last I heard, there were 3 jurisdictions in the state of Arizona that have adopted the 2024, but that was January. So
Okay, yeah,
and I know of at least 2 others that were moving towards adoption.
right.
But
So but Tempe hasn't, is my understanding,
not yet.
and
Chandler has, Phoenix has, we have.
and Gilbert hasn't.
Correct.
So,
As of
and
January.
Scottsdale has not.
Right.
Okay,
But Scottsdale's on the 21.
21, correct. All right, so that's kind of what I've been hearing too, is a lot of them have it on their books, but they haven't adopted it yet. So it's still fairly new. So there's not a lot of people doing it. And like I said,
To that point, though, I will also say that some of the jurisdictions will have a bit of a domino effect. For example, Pima County, Oro Valley may follow suit now that the city's adopted it, the city of Tucson's adopted it.
Right.
And this is Dan. Pima County's actually taking it to P and Z next Wednesday. And then we will take it to the board in April.
okay,
So we are moving forward with the adoption. Amendments would match, obviously,
right.
guys' recommendation, so we would match with the cities.
And let me ask you, Dan, I mean, you asked that question earlier about, if somebody was asking about the amendments and stuff. Is everybody on board with the amendments, or is there any pushback?
I haven't really received any pushback. As a matter of fact, that was a board office that reached out, and thank you, Dennis and Ken and Clayton, for your input on the questions. But I haven't heard any pushback. I think they're just wanting, my take is they just want to understand our reasoning, why we did change those, amended those sections the way we did. Saba had reached out. I think they did the same thing to the city. with two proposed amendments. One was to change amend the air changes back to 5 because 2024 in residential reduces it to climate zone 2 from 5 to 4. And they wanted to have duct insulation. They want, if they use the energy modeling, that's not what they called it in the IRC. I forgot exactly what they called it, but essentially the energy modeling. If they could then use the R6 insulation in unconditioned space versus R8, that was the two items they've asked for. I told them unless I was directed by P&Z or the board, we were going to stick with the amendments that we have.
Good, yeah, I agree.
Yeah. That ductwork in a
So
unconditioned attic space.
Yeah.
You know, when that temperature's 150 degrees, you know.
Yeah.
that-
Or outside.
Yeah, that R8 is.
Minimum.
Ever.
Absolutely minimum, yeah. So, and
I actually have a rule in my office. They have to get approval from me if there's more than 12 feet of roof duct with R8 in it,
right,
because they know how much heat it picks up even at that.
even at that, yeah, no, I agree.
So,
The only way I would accept the R6 if the unconditioned space is the mechanical room. You know, where
Right.
it's still, you know, at least somewhat protected from
Right.
that high heat,
That,
but if it's
you
in
know,
an attic or outside,
if Saba really wants to build a house with R6, move the insulation to the deck.
yes,
Bring it all in, bring all the equipment inside. They're putting all the air handlers up in there.
right,
We have an R2 insulation level on the inside, and
Yeah.
it's just like, why would you want that in 150-degree space?
right,
It
Yeah.
just doesn't make sense. Oh, absolutely, absolutely. But the end user is the one that ends up paying for it.
Yeah.
Yep.
When you have that kind of compromise and revision, that's something I would not support if it came across this board.
Well,
Yeah.
that's why I think Clayton said the same thing. He wasn't going to make, well, I don't want to speak for Clayton, but I believe they said basically the same thing unless directed. They were not going to make any changes to those
good,
sections. Obviously, our whole intent of the joint committee is to make our amendments as close as possible. I do think in conversations that I've had with the town of Oro Valley, Sahuarita, and in Marana, they eventually will be moving forward with the adoption of the 2024 energy code. They
okay,
just haven't established a date
okay,
at this time.
even Marana,
That's my understanding.
okay.
Jurisdictions have code committees like this, where the staff handle those, you know?
Staff seems like it.
Staff is my understanding,
Maybe staff,
But they've sat in.
they almost, all the building officials in the area, when we went through all the meetings, were joined online.
yes, I saw that, yeah. Yeah, even other jurisdictions, true, yeah. So down in Sierra Vista and yeah, other areas, right,
Cochise County might have.
right,
Well, lucky for us, the other jurisdictions pretty much follow what this committee recommends, so. Which would be a nightmare. if we had
Thank goodness
five-
for me as a contractor that they do. There are a few exceptions in Oro Valley.
Well, on that topic, I'd like to give Dan Ice commendation for consistently organizing meetings on a monthly basis with all the building officials in southern Arizona. So that is a key factor to us all staying on the same page.
Yeah, that's.
yeah, that's great,
Well, thanks, Dan.
yeah.
So are we finished with this topic?
Yep.
Move on to the energy housing.
Emergency.
Emergency.
Yeah.
We're stuck on energy.
Energy on the brain.
Right,
Okay, so let Clayton, tell us what this is all about.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the board. So 2 weeks ago, the city of Tucson adopted a emergency housing declaration. which gives express authority to planning and development services for zoning, special zoning considerations, special building code considerations, and authority to the fire marshal for fire code considerations to accommodate a number of different configurations associated with housing, primarily shelter. And that is really the focus of my current initiative right now for potential new code language that may be coming to you in the near future. What we are looking at doing is establishing a set code that can be used indefinitely into the future, even without an emergency declaration, that accommodates some level of small shelter configurations. And we have been engaging a number of different folks across the region and other regions. We've communicated with the city of Seattle, city of Portland, city of San Francisco, a number of cities that have similar declarations and code considerations. And we're also engaging folks such as La Frontera and Primavera Foundation that operate facilities to provide shelter care. And so this communication effort is to gather information to help craft potential code language. Mr. Coon?
Just quickly, by shelter, do you mean like similar to like dormitory type housing or?
No,
What is that?
but I'm glad you brought that up because I would like to turn the floor over to Mr. Bill Mackey, guest speaker, who has offered to come in and share some of the work that he's specifically been working on.
Okay. So I'm an architect, and I've been, practicing architecture for 30 years, 25 years. And so I've done a range of housing and commercial and institutional work. But I also work at the Drockman Institute, which is with the College of Architecture, Planning, and Landscape Architecture at the University of Arizona. And for the past 4 or 5 years, I've specifically been looking at land use regulation and policy. And part of that has been with residential care services, which is a specific item within the zoning code. And temporary shelters fall under that code item. And there's been a push across the country by various jurisdictions to really make it easier for these types of facilities to be built. Because currently right now, if you wanted to build one in the city of Tucson, it would take a year just to get the site entitlement process. And then once you get that, there isn't anything in the code that talks about the pallet buildings or the tents or any sort of sleeping quarters that these people are living in. So as an example, we're doing a project with Primavera in the city of South Tucson, and I'm meeting with Wildan this afternoon to discuss how they're going to look at it in the code, because it doesn't exist. I suggested using tiny homes, and which is like Appendix Q of the IRC. But they refuse to do that because a tiny home must have a bathing and cooking facilities. In order to be a dwelling unit, it has to have those things. And so it's not that. And so they don't know what to do. I'll find out today at 2 what they want to do. And the city of Tucson's the same. I'm sure Pima County's the same. And so I was looking at what people have done elsewhere, and the state of California and the city of Seattle in particular were 2 documents that are kind of different. So they're good examples to compare and contrast. California, but both of them are a result of an emergency declaration. Like, they don't exist without it being an emergency shelter, which is the interesting thing about the city of Tucson, is saying we want to take it into normalcy when the emergency declaration doesn't exist, which is awesome. And I'm currently working with planning and development services to try and revise the whole residential care services part of the code. So that's long view. The short view is we need to build these things. And like I said, nobody knows what to do without, certain documentation. And so the California code is good in that it recognizes the variety of different kinds of shelters people do. So right now in the city of Tucson, there's tents, there's pallet shelters, and the shelters that we're using at Primavera are actually like plywood with insulation and interior finishes and an exterior skin, like they're like real structures. So there's a huge variety. And in California even includes, car parks where people can live in cars. And so it's taking into account the variety of types of emergency housing that could exist in the landscape.
But some of that's like permanent construction, but
No.
other would be not permanent, or is it all kind of not?
It can be permanent construction, but
Then you'd really have to follow the building code.
not necessarily. I mean, what California does is they say it can be on permanent or temporary sites, and the housing can be portable. It doesn't say that the construction's permanent or not. They have different kinds of classifications of there's an emergency transportable housing unit, there's a manufactured home, there's a membrane structure, there's a mobile home, there's a multifamily manufactured home, there's a park trailer, there's a recreational vehicle, and there's a tent. It's kind of their subjects that fall under that. But what they do require is that, like emergency sleeping cabins, it has to have specific floor live loads, has to have roof live loads, wall live loads, snow loads if necessary, a certain ceiling height, 2 forms of egress, adequate ventilation. If any plumbing, mechanical, electrical is put in it, it needs to follow code, has to have smoke alarms, carbon monoxide alarms. If you do tents, you can only have it for 7 days. And so there's like the specificity that the California does in terms of making these things safe and to a particular code for these particular types of installations. They even talk about multiple rooms within buildings. The interesting thing about the California code and the Seattle code is they both defer to kind of the local agency in terms of fire separation, fire sprinklers, smoke alarms, etc., if they're not covered by the code. So the first time I presented to Wildan, I'm like, these buildings are 10 feet away. That's like no big deal, right? Like they're built out of great material. They're 10 feet away, nothing to worry about. And they're like, yeah, there is stuff to worry about because we're Wildan. And so you need to have a fire marshal or the fire department, at least in California, and in Seattle, they're deferring to those folks to look at the site plan and see about those issues. Seattle takes a very different approach. So where California is talking about live loads, ventilation, egress, all that stuff, Seattle has said, if the tiny home, and they use the word tiny home, is less than 120 square feet, and it's located on a skid without a permanent foundation, then they're not gonna look at it. It's considered what they put in quotes, wooden tents. And it just doesn't even get reviewed. It would just be like a rectangle on a site plan that could be built out of anything. The fire department will look at the site plan to see about the spacing. So that's a complete end of different spectrum from what the California code says. I kind of appreciate the California code because it covers, it's just a little bit more, it covers all the different scenarios that exist and provides guidelines for them. The Seattle code, if I wanted to do a project with a bunch of cars on a site, I don't know how they would look at that. Or if, you did tents, I don't know how they would look at that. So anything else that gets built, like kitchens, and any other facilities, bathing facilities, if they're not portable, if they don't connect to utilities, or if they do connect to utilities, then they would be reviewed. And the approach that we were taking with the South Tucson site, and I think the California code covers this, that would be IBC. So if you're doing like a shelter space that has an outdoor kitchen, you have to follow all IBC rules regarding structure, ventilation, mechanical, etc.
I'm curious about the emergency designation, though. If that means there's a need to get this thing built quickly, then all the normal building code approvals for the permanent part, if you did have a permanent cooking area, permanent bathroom area to support what essentially is some type of campground, it sounds like, going through the normal permitting of that, though, is still going to take all this time.
It will.
Is the emergency idea that somehow that gets streamlined?
I think with the current emergency declaration, yes. Like as far as Seattle goes, I don't think so in California. But with the way that the city's set up the emergency declaration is that the planning and zoning examiner and the building code official can look at everything on a case-by-case basis. And so I think it would be up to the architect and the engineers to follow those specific codes for those specific items that are appropriate. So if you're doing like a public use thing, use the IBC.
To do that, those would likely be simple buildings.
The problem is site entitlement. The problem isn't a kitchen sink. It's getting the site there. Thankfully, with South Tucson, a rezoning only takes, like 45 days maybe. Whereas with the city of Tucson, it could be a 6 to 8 to 12 to 18 to 24, 36.
He says, yeah.
That's a different issue. That's an issue I'm not talking about.
My neighborhood. Seems to be
The interesting thing, though, I think there is a sea change with that, and there's more document, and that's another thing that we're working on, is there is more documentation out there about these facilities not being negative aspects to the environment. And so the more education that there is, the better for that. Accessibility. The state of California uses the emergency, what is it? It's some long document. It's guidelines for emergency structures that was adopted in 2014 by the federal government. But basically 5 or 10% of the site needs to be accessible, depending on what you're looking at. I think it would be a good idea to make that number like type B versus type A units in multifamily housing, that there's a certain percentage that's accessible, or that it has the ability to become accessible. With some of the units, you can't really do total accessibility in terms of maneuvering. You can get them to the front door, but once you get inside, some of them are so small, it's not really that possible with a bed there. But it's something to look at. The other thing that I'm interested in having you all kind of investigate is gray water, and how that factors into these sites. It would be great if these sites could have gray water systems and not tie into sewer. That's a huge cost. And if there's ways for like sinks, not necessarily toilets, but sinks and showers to be utilized for landscaping, or just water harvesting or whatever.
presumably toilets could be portable if that were to happen.
Yeah, so what we're doing at Primavera is portable toilets and portable showers. They're serviced. Yeah. If you know, the California basically says you have to have bathing facilities. And if they're tied to utilities, then follow the code. If they're portable, they're portable. You don't have to have cooking facilities at these sites, but if you do, follow the code. Some, Primavera is entertaining the idea of just having food brought to the site through a service. The other big issue is coordination. I can guarantee you everyone that runs a shelter or wants to build a shelter is going to build one in Tucson now because they have the emergency declaration. Pima County doesn't have it. City of South Tucson doesn't have it. Oro Valley doesn't have it. Marana doesn't have it. And so you guys are going to get hit. If today's meeting goes south with Wildan and something happens with zoning or whatever, I know my clients, which is the Tucson Hope Factory, which are the people that are building these things, will instantly say, where can we go in Tucson? And so it's the coordination of a region, like you guys were just talking about with the IEC, is really important, that everyone's on the same page so that not one area gets hit hard. We just learned that lesson with the middle housing bill. I wrote the study that helped mayor and council pass it, and our first recommendation was to go citywide instead of what the state recommended, which was 1 mile radius. And our justification was like, the 1 mile radius is hit hard. If you look at an economic analysis of the city, that area is just beat up, and they have all the stupid overlays and all the different planning processes, and you're just adding one more thing. Why not spread it out and let the east side take some pressure off of the central core? And it's the same kind of rationale for getting everybody on board, hopefully at the same time. Yeah, yes. Phoenix is really upset. The historic neighborhoods in Phoenix are really upset. And the funny thing is that they just created amendment to their amendment, which is absolutely asinine because it's taking the national historic districts off, which is the part that you want to protect. The local historic districts are protected. Armory Park and West University, and Fort Lowell, and El Presidio and Barrio, they're all protected to go through the same process they have to go through. But the National Historic Districts, you could tear down a Sam Hughes house any second you wanted and put up whatever. So it's kind of a stupid thing. I think that's it. Is that enough?
It's a fantastic introduction. Any questions for Mr. Mayor?
So it sounds like we need to provide shelter that isn't the traditional residence with a kitchen and bath.
Yeah, so the basic MO is a sleeping quarters. And people are doing it in a variety of ways. Like the Tucson Homing Project, which is trying to get a facility built in the Amphi area, I think of like 10 units, is using pallet construction. I'm not exactly sure what these are. They're not the best environmental performance structures. We're using stuff that's built by volunteer labor, so it's more like a habitat process where there's plywood and insulation and studs and finish, and so they actually perform quite well. But other people, like Primavera at the Star Village, is using tents. So there's a wide range of things, but the commonality is that there are these small units without a sink and without cooking facilities. Sacramento County, which is another really good example for you guys to look at, which utilizes the Appendix P, but the state of California has built hundreds of these at multiple sites, and they're kind of like the pallet type construction. But what they're finding is they're mostly single occupancy. So that, it's not a situation where you have two or more people in it. In fact, the two people versions that they have aren't getting utilized as much. And the reason they did that was for, like couples that need housing, but that's not an issue. That's not the demographic that they're serving. It's usually single men or single women.
There's no occupancy group for that kind of shelter.
There's I mean,
You could-
it's like SROs, like it's the closest thing I can think of. And SROs have been wiped away from the code since who knows when. And I think they're hopefully coming back, but we'll see. But yeah, it's not. And so California does say it's like, they give it an occupant load of one person per 70 square feet. And if you add on, it's 50 square feet per person. So. Energy's not taken into account at all. They want ventilation.
It's interesting because we just put into the code requirements for cooling for residential, that they have to have minimum performance standards. And of course, the code's forever had minimum heating
Yeah,
standards.
heating and fresh air.
Either of that would be required.
Heating is required for state of California.
State of California.
They say, where do they say it? Something about degrees.
See, they have the same issues, in the desert portion that we would have.
Yeah, there's some real inland hot climates in California.
They just say adequate heating.
Historically, the building codes only talk about heating.
Right.
And fresh air. And cooling's an issue. At Drachman, we think it's a huge issue, right? Like, so that's why we built these units to, they're going to get mini splits, like a 3/4. If we can find a 1/2 ton, we'll do it, but we can't find one that works electrically.
Well, the 3/4 are still 115 volt. They're really small, so
Yeah.
you're probably you're not going to gain anything by going any smaller.
But Seattle doesn't even, like, they don't even,
But if you're
they
just
don't look at
putting-
it.
Okay, so you're putting mini splits in them, then you probably got electric light in them, so they really feel like little buildings.
And we have power for cell phone, so they're sweet. I mean, they're like, it's banded birch interior, like this, and I think the material cost is $7,000. I'm trying to get a different skin on it because right now it's corrugated and it's just sharp
It's
and
anecdotal, but
nasty.
my office is near Alvernon and Speedway. And your clients that you want a house, they sleep in my office every night on the grounds. I know they're there every night in the alley behind. They light fires for cooking, maybe for warmth. Trash everywhere. Nevertheless, there's a lot of people offering services, but the people are still there. They don't want to take those services.
Yeah, and the other interesting thing about having the geography be, and all the jurisdictions be communicating is that these folks aren't migratory. Like, they live within particular areas of town. They don't go like
I've seen the same people.
from one river to another or whatever. Like, they stay there. And so one of the big things that a lot of these shelters are doing now is they are really working at alleviating the zone in which it's being built, so that anybody that comes to the facility is within a 1 mile or 2 mile radius of that site, that hangs out and lives on the streets in that area. And that's how they, that's part of the kind of entrance application.
Yeah, but they have to be in the city close by, because in the daytime, they leave my area, they scatter and they come back.
Yeah.
And if you push them off to the side someplace, there's no transportation, then nobody's gonna wanna live there.
Well, that's the big issue with the shelter care services is, they can't be 300 feet to near an R2. They can't be this and that. They can't be that. And if you document on just your typical square mile of Tucson with the commercial periphery and the residential, there's maybe 2 sites that they could possibly be located at.
It's a tough one to crack.
It's not, you just get rid of the code and you'd be welcoming. But, like that's not gonna happen.
So, sounds like my cue. So that, thank you very much. Excellent summary. And the only piece that I think might have been missing is an overall size. You talked about 70 square feet, but I believe you're targeting approximately 120 square feet for the
We're
majority of your
doing
units.
8 by 12 for our units, and that's kind of based off of a sheet of plywood. And so I think a lot of and Sacramento has similar kind of dimension.
So
And ours are actually tall. So, but most of them are 8 feet tall.
So here's where I'm at. The emergency declaration works very, very well to apply specific interpretation to an emergency need on a temporary basis. But it also relies on a tremendous amount of discretion. And that can be very challenging for a municipality to maintain consistency. And so what we don't want is to say, well, this works over here, but it doesn't work over there because somebody else looked at it, right? So if we can start to establish these norms, these standards, and potentially even prescriptive allowances, then it can be applied to everyone equally, which is really my target. What we're finding is that, and also I'd like to say that this isn't a new proposal. I have heard of similar proposals for about the past 6 or 7 years. It really started to ramp up on the Occupy movement, where we saw different options and suggestions on how to approach this. And we saw a number of folks come forward offering their properties. Most frequently, in my experience, were churches or religious facilities where they're like, hey, we've got all of this parking that we would like to dedicate to some of these temporary or mobile or small shelters to help accommodate this emerging need. And so what I see is that they clearly don't meet the IRC, because in order to meet the IRC, it requires bathing and cooking facility, or it has to be accessory to a dwelling. So in order to use the IRC, we would have to either make it a full dwelling unit, or it would have to be accessory to a dwelling unit. And that's not really what we're seeing, right? So the IBC would classify them as sleeping units. There's a term defined in the IBC for sleeping units, but that falls under an R occupancy, which requires them to be sprinkled, and a number of other things. And sprinkling obviously is problematic because there's no plumbing in these things, right? And so, we've got the Drockman Institute saying, hey, we want to place these 8 by 12 structures with no plumbing. Why would we require sprinkling in those if they're 10 feet apart, right? They're providing an alternative means of fire protection via fire separation. So what I would like to begin the proposal is to create a new occupancy group for these types of structures that clearly defines their construction methods. Now, in order to be as flexible as possible, we have to realize that there's all of these different configurations. If someone wants to set up a tent village, obviously those tents wouldn't need to meet the IBC. However, regardless of what these small shelters are constructed out of, the one commonality is that they are all dependent on supportive services. In order to qualify as a sleeping unit, it would have to have some means of bathing, clothes washing, other sanitation needs, restrooms, either a commercial kitchen or access to food service, right? And so these small units, from my perspective of basic life safety, are dependent on those other services. So it, to me, clearly fits under the IBC, because what we're talking about is public facilities that can provide those external services to independent sleeping units. And it's really just a matter of how we could find some prescriptive code to build units that are reasonably safe. And I am looking at a minimum of one receptacle inside the unit, a minimum of one light inside the unit, heating and cooling, and minimum energy efficiency. So those are the basic criteria that I'm starting with, and working out how to create a section of code that could accommodate that. Mr. Kuhn.
I got a couple of thoughts. Number one is if you actually did have one dwelling unit on the site, that would give you your sanitation, it would give you your kitchen, and then the ability to have multiple accessory buildings, which would be all these sleeping things. That could, maybe that's a way of addressing it and push it more toward the residential side of the code than to the commercial side. I don't know if that helps or not, but
Here's
one thought.
here's my concern with that. And also let me just back up and say that in order to provide the greatest amount of flexibility, it needs to be able to cater to different organizations. So a church is one example. A community college would be another example. And or what about an existing care facility? What about an existing adult care home that has extra property and they want to put? Those are three distinct different occupancy groups. However, the one commonality is the public facilities for restrooms and the potential for a commercial kitchen. So my concern with a house is we would have to limit the number of detached accessory sleeping units in order to maintain minimum sanitation. If that's a one bathroom house, how many external sleeping spaces could we really facilitate?
I wasn't suggesting that it would be a conventional house per se. It could have multiple bathrooms in it, enough for however many sleeping units. And it could still have a residential kitchen that had enough appliances in it that it would be useful for the size of the facility, but it could still be considered a house. And that could be a way of not, because I hear a commercial kitchen and I'm thinking class one hood and all this kind of stuff, and cost is.
Well, yeah, I mean, cost goes up anyway with what you're talking about.
Bring fire sprinklers in and, bringing in the big pipe and all of it, it's a huge cost.
But just building one toilet is too expensive for these people.
Yeah,
so
then you need a provision for having portable facilities.
Yeah. So it's I mean, that is why Seattle has done what they've done, is for cost reasons.
Now, with this unit though, with the air conditioning in it and a few electric outlets, is that a unit built on a foundation, so it becomes a permanent real building?
So no.
We're doing ours on redwood skids that are rebarred into graded
So maybe the way you address it is that it's not a permanent building, and then you don't have to follow this guy and so many other more rigorous codes, and you treat it to a lower standard. But if you're building that thing, you get to the point where it gets regulated by the Office of Manufactured Housing, and then you have to meet all those codes, which is, I think, now still essentially the 2009 building codes, which is still going to have everything.
But that's the choice of the facility and what they want to use to provide for housing, and that California has that. You can use a manufactured house if you want.
Two different things, where Clayton's almost looking for some technical rules, but you're looking for just the freedom to be able to build things. And I'm hearing that.
Yeah, and I'm looking for the freedom for sure. I'm always looking for the freedom. regulations, but creating technical standards that are flexible and cover the variety of potentials.
Flexible without a framework is just like it is where the electricians know they want to get a certain electrical inspector and not get the other electrical inspector because
that's
they
the
interpret things two different ways.
But that's why I like the California code, is because it's flexible with a framework. It understands all the various options that these communities have tried to use in order to provide housing. And it has guidelines within each of those. So the tent has specific guidelines, the sleeping unit has a specific guideline, the manufactured unit has a specific guideline.
And to clarify, what I'm primarily focused on is the structures that are built out of studs and T111 and, you know, these what appear to be resilient structures, okay, that could be permanent in nature or semi-permanent. From our perspective, temporary is time-based. If it's there for more than 30 days, okay, then the temporary classification starts to erode. And what we're seeing is like 30 days is not long enough. And so
Could you change that though to say 5 years?
or could we approach it from a different perspective? I think that, you know, I am open to designs that are prepared by a registrant that demonstrate that ballast is essentially equal to, you know, resisting the overturning and wind load factors that would be exposed to these structures. But that, you know, that would allow it to be placed on a parking lot, right, on skids, if it had ballast or some other means to tie it down to resist those overturning forces. So it's, if we're talking about tents and we are talking about legitimate temporary structures, that clearly fits into the discretionary option where we can go look at it. We can figure out like minimum code just to make sure that those minimum life safety provisions are met. But what I'm targeting is the semi-permanent structures that could be there for 5 years or could be there for 1 year, right? If it's there for a year, it should not be treated as temporary simply because it's going to have a whole year's worth of weathering and exposure that it needs to resist. And there's no reason that it wouldn't need to.
Probably look at the homing project, because that's probably, you know,
it's right in that sweet spot, right in between.
We're doing,
right?
And step above 10. Like, what's the lowest form of shelter that qualifies as, you know, lasting longer than a 10? What can you prove that?
So I will also say that I'm targeting a maximum of 200 square feet for these. That number was chosen selectively because that happens to be the size that the code says for a storage shelter. Doesn't require a building permit.
Correct.
And I'm not suggesting that these are built without a permit. What I'm suggesting is that existing structures that were built without a permit could be converted to serve this purpose, right? And so there's some logic associated with picking 200 square feet.
There's another problem. I mean, it doesn't require a building permit, but it requires zoning approval, which is a whole other issue.
So if we're just focused on the building.
Correct.
Building safety.
Correct. There's other folks that are working on the zoning stuff, and we're trying to
Zoning's a long
framework
one.
the building.
Yeah.
The other advantage to capping an area for these types of structures is the occupant load. I firmly believe that we should lean heavily on the minimum 70 square feet. That's not only identified in the building code for a minimum area of a habitable space, it's also identified in state code for care facilities, things of that nature. And also there's several different regulations that identify cohabitation of 50 square feet per occupant. So it would be a minimum of 70 square feet for one occupant, minimum of 100 square feet for two occupants, maximum 200 square feet overall. And so we're starting to craft like how we could reasonably come up with some building code regulations that would allow different volunteer organizations or what have you to step up and meet the housing emergency with these types of buildings.
So are we gonna assume this is a permanent structure? I'm just thinking if you have a successful project, it's gonna be occupied for years.
The answer is yes, okay? And the answer is yes because from a zoning perspective, if they allow it outside of a temporary use, it is permanent, right? Because they've now gotten zoning approval for it, right? Unless it is a temporary use permit, it defaults to permanent, right? And that's exactly where I'm trying to find the sweet spot for the building code to accommodate a permanent installation of these, what I am currently calling micro cabins. So terminology also comes into play. We can't use terms that the building code's already defined. They don't meet the definition of a dwelling unit. They don't meet the definition of a sleeping unit. So what do we call them? A number of different proposed terms have been presented. Shelter is one, obviously. Shelter is not a favorite term amongst some of the care providers because it has some negative connotation to what is included with that provision. Bill Mackey's term, I believe, is lodge or micro lodge.
That's what we're using on the South Tucson site because lodges are allowed in the I zone that they're existing.
Right. So it's finding that right
That's the
term.
attorney that came up with that.
You mentioned like a limited electrical system. Well, if you're a sleeping unit, now in the electrical code, you have to space the outlets like it's a dwelling unit, so you have to put more in.
Which I'm not
Maybe
leaning
not a
towards.
huge hardship, that's probably one of the lower cost things to do, but still. And then, but our fault breaker is expensive and the complexity if you truly follow code. So if you could keep from calling it a sleeping unit and keep from calling it a dwelling unit, maybe we could write our own rules saying what has to be the minimum for that. But then it really becomes a question, do you really write a rule that doesn't have arc fault protection, that doesn't have ground fault protection? And
I think it should though. And so, it's an interesting segue, right? We've established that these types of structures should not be considered temporary, which to me also means they should not be supplied with an extension cord.
Yeah.
Right? We need a permanent means of electricity, okay, to provide them because it is essentially a permanent structure. So,
But you don't need 100 amps.
but you don't need 100 amps for that individual unit, right? We do need some minimum
So you can look at
How would
electrocution
how would you
context.
service a 70 square foot unit?
We're doing a 2-circuit panel.
Yeah, where I would start with,
Means a
if it's a self-contained building, it's still gonna need a little panel on the outside.
Okay,
That would have to meet the code rules for having a panel on the building, but it could be, like you said, a little 2-circuit panel. One breaker doing the outlets and the light, the other breaker doing, say, your little.
Heating and cooling.
Having the mini split on a dedicated breaker and then everything else on the other breaker.
Yep.
Being that simple, I think would be all you would need, and it's not gonna really hurt anybody. They're not gonna have a risk of fire, and if you use an arc fault breaker, and then, you need GFCI protection, that depends on how much water is in the unit, I think. If there really isn't any and it's watertight, you probably wouldn't need
No.
that. That's pretty economical, and load-wise, 20 amps would probably handle it. And you could design things that way, and that would be cheap to build on the electrical side. But if you got electricity, though, you're gonna have a hardwired smoke alarm also.
Yep. So that's something that Appendix P, I believe, requires portable fire extinguishers inside each unit. I'm not convinced that provides a level of protection that meets any of our other codes. I do believe that we need to put interconnected smoke detectors in them.
You mean powered smoke detector?
Well, so
Are you thinking to sound adjacent units?
to sound adjacent units, and I think that's really relative to how far apart they are. So in consideration of different types of configurations, right? 10 feet apart is ideal. If they're 10 feet apart, a single smoke detector in each unit would not need to, notify adjacent units. But what if they want to put them closer, right? How close can we get before all of a sudden now we are in a lodge condition, right? What I'm not trying to facilitate is building 24 of these side by side, right? Right side by side throughout an entire lot. To me, that now we're clearly in the provisions for other types of dwelling.
I think you could blend the
Buildings.
IRC and the IBC with this and, in terms of fire separation, because, I mean, the fire is a danger in these units. They happen. But, if you're the 6 feet that you guys have for your amendment to the IRC, I would think that would be enough without fire protection.
Or theoretically, they could step up how the exterior walls are constructed, right? In order to get even closer.
Yeah, no, if you
Again, now
go, I think if you go within, if you go closer than what is allowed without fire protection, yeah, you provide fire protection, but, if that's just adding cost.
Mhm.
What sort of scale are we talking about? Is it hundreds, thousands?
So in general, the sites like to be around 40 as a maximum. As in terms of just like being able to administer it and all that. But Sacramento has like 200 people on some sites. The homing project, which is doing a 10-unit site right now, is talking about a multiple 100, 200 on one site. So there can be a lot on one. But those are,
Multiple sites.
acre, multiple acre sites.
Which is also directly associated with the community services that they're providing on site.
Yeah.
They can only scale up to the capacity that they can, effectively help. those
But I'm
people.
doing, for the South Tucson site, I have an access road that loops into the site so that I have 150 feet for the fire
Right.
truck to get to the back of every single unit.
And so, I mean, and these sites then have like a community bathroom or something like that, right? So it is very similar to a trailer park, right?
Yeah.
So they could either do a community wash area or kitchen, or they could have it plumbed and served by that same site as you would a trailer park.
Exactly. So I'll use Star Village as an example. Star Village has a shower trailer.
Right.
Okay, so a mobile shower unit, and then they have individual portable toilets spaced throughout the space, and then they have community tents. The community tents provide heating and cooling, okay, reprieve, because the tenants are actually in tents, nylon tents, and then there's a separate tent for cooking, eating in general. So yes, and it is directly tied to the community services that they're providing those tenants.
It sounds like we need to create a new occupancy group. I think if we try and modify the existing ones, it's gonna create more issues.
One option is to consider potentially like an R5 in the building code, right? The IBC goes up to R4 right now. We could implement an R5. Or we could create a whole new occupancy group. I think the key is going to be how this new classification interacts with other groups. So I mentioned earlier the different types of facilities. You can have an outpatient clinic that's a B occupancy. You can have an I1 that is, a detox facility. An R1, transient in nature, right? Where it's a boarding house, right? or a halfway house. So there's a number of different existing occupancies, I think, that could provide the supporting services, but it's really a matter of how we tie an occupancy group to the individual shelter unit itself to the required supporting services that are necessary. Because if it doesn't meet the definition of a dwelling unit, then it's dependent on those supporting services.
You can still take an open lot and park your bathroom, your portable bathrooms on it, and build these units and not actually have another facility there.
And in which case, my thought there, okay, is that it would kick it into the operational permit for the fire department to maintain the conditions for the tent. Maybe it's a, maybe it's a manufactured building or a modular building that's just dropped for a temporary time. That's a little bit easier to assign a building occupancy and, potentially a certificate of occupancy. But if the supporting services buildings and or facilities, structures, technically a portable toilet qualifies as a structure. Okay, so I will say the supporting buildings and or structures, if they do not have a certificate of occupancy, like a church would, then it would require an operational permit through the fire department to maintain, the requirements in that temporary facility.
How does the state view those? So you've got a site and you've got some group that's managing that site. Does it require a license from the state?
Depends on it depends on the level of care. So health services would kick in if it is a care facility where they are providing care that would qualify for a care license.
Okay.
So that, again,
That can get a little confusing.
it's right in between,
Right.
several existing regulations.
So you could potentially require a state license.
If that's the level of care that is being provided.
I'm curious to how the state would view that.
So
You got any interaction with the state?
not specifically on this topic, but we have a lot of communication with the
Sure you
state.
do.
Well, we're gonna have U of A Emergency Med and U of A Public Health on site. But I don't know if there's any sort of, they regulate their own.
Is that like an hour a day or something like 24 hours?
We haven't worked that out, but they're getting an actual space within the Primavera building that's existing there's actually two properties, and the adjacent property is what we're gonna develop, and this property has an existing facility on it that we're carving out a room for them. So it'll probably be like once a day or
Quite frankly, it
times a
could be
week.
only a percentage of the people utilizing housing that would need more services than just a place, because some of them are probably perfectly capable of taking care of themselves. They just choose, they want to live
Right.
that kind of lifestyle. Others may really need the service, that have medical or psychiatric conditions.
There's a
Issues.
admittance process, and I think they're interested in admitting people that need services for occupational health, behavioral issues.
So your particular project might be more dependent on that. Some others might
Right.
not be.
Right.
And that's just the building code part, then you get the zoning part.
Nightmare,
Yeah, absolutely.
it really is. And then hopefully that'll be ironed out within the next 2 years.
So have you got any pushback from the neighbors adjacent to some of these sites?
It's been pretty quiet on where it is right now, and so that hasn't been too much of an issue. The political community in South Tucson is very supportive of it. But, one site, right by the site is the highway. The other side of the highway is a vacant, business, huge vacant lot. So it's not that much of an issue on where this is located. But I know the homing project went through a long process with their site at that fire at the Amphi. So
Compared to the Star Village though, which sounds to me like a similar kind of facility. That had a lot of noise went on before it got developed, but it ended up being done.
And it's been a positive response so far.
After that, so
It's been very positive.
yeah, I suspect.
There've been neighborhood cleanups that they've participated in, and the people that were complaining have stopped complaining.
That would make sense to me because you move the problem away from the reason.
But that's a truly temporary thing that's gonna be taken down in September, I believe, so.
September, October is the target. Yeah.
Well, I would think the businesses would be in support. You know, like Dennis, there are homeless people around our building.
Yeah.
It's kind of annoying, but it's okay until they start a fire right next to the building. And it's like, okay, we can't tolerate this. I don't know if anybody started fires at your place.
No, but down in Alvernon, the original Alvernon Optical Building, that I think Terry Atkinson did in '61, that had a fire built next to it and it burned the wood siding and ended up going up into the ceilings rafters.
Yeah, I think that's the concern most businesses have, is, you know, cold nights and they start fires and we're right up against the building.
Or just having to smell the smoke from it. In the cold weather, every day I come in and it's just real smoky. The trouble is, on the other side of the alley are people living in single family homes and they've got to deal with it too. I think they complain a lot.
Quite a problem.
Good luck.
Not a regulatory
But actually,
issue.
you know, the zoning thing's a whole nother issue. Once they find a site for it, then
Well, they gotta,
it does alleviate.
yeah, they gotta classify. And you think it goes under residential care?
It does,
Zoning?
yeah, it's, residential care services has like 4 different subcategories,
Yeah, it needs to be updated.
very much. Yeah, if you're a teenager that's pregnant or a elderly person that's disabled or a homeless person, you have to ask mayor and council for approval to where you live. It's compassionate society, right?
So with that being said, we will be scheduling a follow-up meeting with this board in March. I know that we talked about a quarterly meeting, but we've got some work that needs to be done on a fairly tight time frame in order to accommodate some of these projects that are functioning under the emergency clause, right? But we want to start, the process to get some prescriptive code out there. So we will be bringing back some draft language for you to consider for next month.
So you're thinking about a new occupancy group, whatever you call it?
Unless somebody's got another great idea, I think to me, the path of least resistance is creating a new occupancy group specifically for these structures or a new occupancy classification within a group. But relying on existing code provisions as much as possible. I don't want us to have to write a whole code just for these structures if we can point to sections. And so it's really a matter of which sections in the existing codes would apply to these. And that's
Which might be exempted.
right.
Yeah, I mean, appendix would work too, right? Like the way they did the tiny home appendix in the IRC. Or even this, the appendix P.
Yeah, but that still uses the existing occupancy group, right? The
Correct.
tiny homes.
Correct. Yeah, a tiny home is classified as a dwelling unit, which allows it to be built under IRC. I would personally really appreciate if we could find a way to use the prescriptive allowances of the IRC simply because it would allow non-registrants to design them
For sure.
But the challenge is going to be I don't see them fitting into the IRC definition. Simply because it would be dependent on a dwelling, and then we're back to what is the maximum number of these units that could safely and in a healthy way be dependent on that house, without then requiring a tremendous amount of upgrades to the house.
Right on the bleeding edge, Clayton.
If it was easy, everybody'd be doing it.
Okay,
You're probably making an R5, which gets it closer to residential,
right.
than the right division. Even. Probably not wrong.
Okay. So if you don't have enough to do, Clayton, you're gonna come up with a draft for next month. So we got one more item here, 7, call to the audience. Something to say? See, there's no sound online.
That was when the meeting first started at 10:06.
That's sticking.
Okay. Nobody? No one here? Okay. On to item 8, adjournment.
Dennis, I move to adjourn.
Second,
A second.
all in favor?
Aye.
Is anyone opposed?
Thank you so much for your time.
Thanks, Clayton.
Appreciate you coming out.
Yeah.
Yeah, but.
Validation.
Yeah.